"Don't you have a lawyer, ma'am?" Marcus smirked, his voice slicing through the courtroom like a blade. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I kept my hands folded on my lap and stared straight ahead at the judge's bench. I was waiting. I am 65 years old, a black woman, a widow, a mother, and the man who married my daughter was laughing at me as if I were a punchline. My name is Lillian Morgan, and I was there because my son-in-law was trying to take everything I owned, and my daughter believed him. Just 3 days earlier, I had been standing in my kitchen when the knock came. Not the polite knock of a neighbor, not the familiar rhythm of church friends. This one was sharp, official. When I opened the door, a uniformed courier stood there with an envelope in his hand. He didn't meet my eyes. "You've been served," he said. The words didn't register at first. I took the envelope, closed the door, and stood there staring at it like it might bite me. My hands shook as I tore it open. Court summons. My name printed in bold letters. My own daughter listed as a party to the case. I remember sinking into the kitchen chair, the same one my husband used to sit in every morning with his coffee and newspaper. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, sued by my own family, accused of mismanaging my finances, declared unfit. I hadn't even finished reading when the doorbell rang again. This time, I knew who it was. Marcus stood on my porch like he owned it, dressed sharp as always, confidence rolling off him in waves. Tasha stood beside him, arms crossed, her face tight and unfamiliar. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask if I was okay. "Mom," she said, not warmly, not unkindly either, just distant. "We need to talk." Marcus stepped inside without waiting to be invited. He spoke first, of course. He always did. "We didn't want it to come to this," he said, glancing around my living room as if he were inspecting damaged property. "But you've made things difficult." Difficult. I looked at my daughter, searching her face for the girl I raised, the one who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, the one who cried when I worked late. "Tasha," I said softly, "you know me. You know I would never." "She doesn't," Marcus cut in smoothly. "That's the problem. Things are now." He pulled out documents, laid them on my coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. Papers I'd never seen before, signatures that looked like mine but weren't, accounts I supposedly approved, decisions I supposedly made. "You've been confused lately," he said. "It happens. Age does that." I felt my chest tighten. "That's not true," I said. "Baby, look at me. I am your mother." Tasha finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke me. Doubt. Not concern, not love. Doubt. "You didn't tell me about the accounts, Mom," she said. "You didn't tell me about the withdrawals." Because I didn't know about them. I wanted to scream. Because he did this. Because I trusted him. Instead, I reached for her hand. I needed her to feel me, to remember. "Please," I whispered, "I would never steal from myself. I would never hurt you." Marcus moved fast. 1 second my fingers were brushing my daughter's sleeve, the next I was on the floor. The coffee table edge struck my arm. Pain exploded through my side. I tasted blood. "Don't touch her," Marcus snapped. Tasha gasped, but she didn't help me up. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart shattering into pieces too small to name. The man I welcomed into my family had shoved me like I was nothing, and my daughter stood frozen, watching, believing him. By the time they left, my arm was bleeding and my house felt emptier than it had the day my husband died. Now, in the courtroom, Marcus leaned back in his chair, enjoying himself. "Don't you have a lawyer, ma'am?" he repeated, louder this time. "Or did you forget to arrange that too?" A few people chuckled. Reporters scribbled notes. I could feel the label settling over me, the unstable old woman. My daughter sat beside him, eyes down, jaw tight. She still wouldn't look at me. The judge entered, a white-haired woman with sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority without effort. "Mrs. Morgan," she said, "are you representing yourself today?" Before I could answer, Marcus laughed. "Your Honor, she doesn't have counsel." I stood slowly. My knees protested, but I straightened anyway. "I do," I said. "He's on his way." Marcus smirked. "Of course he is." The judge checked the clock. "This court cannot wait indefinitely." "I understand," I replied. I had spent my whole life understanding waiting for things to get better, waiting for people to do the right thing, waiting for love to be enough. The judge lifted her gavel. Then the doors behind me opened. Not with a bang, not with drama, just the steady sound of footsteps measured, confident, impossible to ignore. The room went quiet. I turned. A man stood in the doorway, tall, composed, silver hair neatly combed back. His charcoal suit was understated but expensive, his presence calm but commanding. He walked forward without haste, like he knew exactly where he belonged. "Your Honor," he said, voice smooth and firm, "Raymond Ellis. I am entering my appearance as counsel for Mrs. Lillian Morgan." A ripple went through the courtroom. Marcus's face drained of color. Raymond stopped beside me. For a moment, he looked at me, not as a lawyer, not as a rescuer, but as someone who remembered the woman I used to be. "You're not alone," he said quietly. And for the first time since the knock on my door, since the blood on my kitchen floor, since my daughter turned away from me, I believed it. If this moment moved you, leave a like and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Who knows? Someone nearby might be watching with you. Raymond Ellis didn't just walk into the courtroom. He brought a storm with him, and for the first time in months, I wasn't the one caught in the eye of it. He handed his credentials to the clerk, exchanged a brief nod with the judge, and took his place beside me like he'd been there from the beginning. "Apologies for the delay, Your Honor," he said, his voice calm but unmistakably commanding. "There were some urgent documents to file before this hearing." Judge Sands raised an eyebrow. "Very well, Mr. Ellis. Let's proceed. Miss Morgan, are you satisfied with this representation?" I nodded, but my voice was stronger than I expected when I said, "Yes, I trust him." Marcus scoffed across the aisle, but I caught the flicker of panic that passed behind his eyes. He hadn't planned for this. Raymond placed his briefcase on the table and pulled out a folder marked "Confidential." Then, like a man flipping open a well-worn Bible, he began. "Before we proceed with witness statements or accusations, I'd like to submit new evidence for the court's review. Specifically, I'd like to challenge the foundational claim that Mrs. P.S. Morgan is incapable of managing her own affairs." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Go on." Raymond handed the documents to the bailiff. "These are bank records, digital correspondence, and notarized statements. They illustrate a series of unauthorized account changes, asset transfers, and manipulated communication, all tracing back to one individual, Marcus Manning." Marcus shifted in his chair. "That's absurd," he snapped. "She's confused. She probably gave me access and forgot." Raymond turned to him then, slowly, like a lion acknowledging a mosquito. "I've dealt with fraud cases for 30 years, Mr. Manning. I know what theft looks like, and I know what grooming looks like, too." End quote. I was creased now. I saw Marcus's jaw tighten. Tasha finally looked up. For a moment her eyes met mine. There was a flicker recognition, or maybe doubt, but just as quickly, she looked away. Raymond continued, voice steady. "What's more troubling is that this was not simply about finances. It was isolation, manipulation, gradual removal of support systems. Phone records show Tasha's number was blocked from Mrs. Morgan's landline and cell phone. Interceptions of mail, visits declined under false pretenses. And if you never yet it." The courtroom went still. Even the judge seemed to pause. Raymond glanced at me, then spoke not to the court but to me. "I'm sorry it took me this long to get here." I swallowed hard. The room blurred for a second, and I realized my hands were clenched tight in my lap. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Not until I saw the summons in the news. I recognized your name, and his—" Judge Sands cleared her throat. "Mr. Ellis, are you implying a personal connection to the parties?" He turned to her without missing a beat. "Yes, Your Honor. I was once engaged to Mrs. Morgan, 40 years ago." Gasps echoed through the courtroom like distant thunder. Marcus shot to his feet. "That's a conflict of interest. He can't represent her if they—" Raymond didn't blink. "I checked with the board. There's no legal conflict. And unlike your relationships, Mr. Manning, mine don't involve stealing from family." "Order," the judge barked. "Sit down, Mr. Manning." He sat, but he didn't stop glaring. Tasha looked utterly lost. Her face had gone pale, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Raymond passed another document to the clerk. "Furthermore, I'd like to request a temporary restraining order against Mr. Manning, for Mrs. Morgan's safety. She was injured during a recent altercation at her home. The judge blinked. Injured? I nodded slowly. He pushed me. I fell and hit the coffee table. I didn't file a report. I was embarrassed. Marcus barked out a bitter laugh. She's lying. She has photos, Raymond said calmly. Dated, with timestamps. I saw the judge's lips tighten. Mr. Manning, she said, if I find any truth in these claims, your credibility in this case will be severely damaged. This isn't looking good for you. I allowed myself a breath. Raymond leaned slightly toward me, voice low. This is only the beginning. Everyone. His words were like bricks under my feet, solid, grounding. I'd been floating for weeks, untethered, drowning in confusion and betrayal. Now, someone had thrown me a line. Across the room, Marcus wasn't smiling anymore. He looked like a man watching his own house burn down, unsure whether to save the furniture or jump out the window. Tasha remained motionless. I couldn't tell whether she was angry, scared, or just broken. But the silence between us felt heavier than anything Marcus had thrown. When court recessed for lunch, the judge called both legal teams forward. Raymond stood tall beside me as we approached. You'll want to reconsider your strategy, Mr. Manning, Judge Sands said flatly. It appears your house of cards is starting to wobble. Outside in the hallway, reporters gathered like vultures. Raymond guided me gently past them, shielding me with his body. We found a bench in the corridor, quiet enough to breathe. I need to ask, I said, finally breaking the silence. Why did you come back? He looked at me, then really looked. Because I owed you. Because I never stopped wondering. And because when I saw what he was doing to you, I knew I had to act. Whether you wanted me here or not. I blinked back tears. He's your son? I asked. Raymond hesitated. Yes, he is. But I haven't spoken to him in over 10 years. His mother and I, it's a long story. I shook my head slowly. No longer than mine, I'm sure. He smiled sadly. We'll get to it. But first we take him down. And just like that, I knew. The courtroom was no longer Marcus's stage. This was going to be a battle. But now, I had an ally. A real one. And Marcus Manning had no idea what was coming. I used to believe that a pot of tea could fix almost anything. A good Earl Grey, steeped just right, with a touch of honey served in porcelain cups I only brought out for company or comfort. For years, it was my ritual. My peace. Even after my husband passed, I kept the habit. Especially then. I'd make 2 cups and place one across the table for him, whispering my thoughts like he was still listening. In that old house, grief made room for quiet conversations with ghosts. When Tasha moved back home after college, I thought it would be the beginning of a new chapter. I set the kettle every afternoon around 4, and she would sit across from me, still in her scrubs from nursing school, asking about recipes, bills, family gossip. We had rebuilt something, piece by piece, until Marcus. I remember the first time he came for tea. He was polite, maybe too polite, called me Mrs. Morgan, even after I insisted on Lillian. He brought pastries from an expensive bakery and placed them neatly on the table like a boy trying to impress the principal. But it wasn't his charm that unnerved me. It was how quickly Tasha softened in his presence. Suddenly, she no longer had time for our afternoon teas. She was tired, busy, distracted. And when she did sit down, her questions weren't about my day anymore. They were about investments, wills, insurance, about how I'd planned for the future. I never did. Back then, I chalked it up to love. Young people make plans, I told myself. They worry. But what I didn't see, what I refused to admit, was that Marcus wasn't just entering our lives. He was reorganizing them. Now, sitting in a quiet side room of the courthouse with Raymond, I stared into a steaming cup of tea he'd picked up from the vending area. It tasted nothing like home. Bitter, oversteeped. Do you still drink it every day? He asked gently. I gave a sad smile. Not like I used to. It's hard when the table's always empty. Raymond's gaze lowered. I tried to reach you after everything, but my letters came back. I blinked. Letters? He nodded. A few. Around the time your husband passed. I didn't want to intrude, but I thought maybe. I shook my head slowly. I never got anything. A silence stretched between us. The hum of fluorescent lights, distant footsteps outside, papers rustling, it all felt too loud. Are you saying, I whispered, That someone stopped them? Raymond exhaled through his nose. If Marcus was already involved, it wouldn't surprise me. Isolation is the first move for men like him. I stared at my tea. He was right. It wasn't just money he took from me. It was connection. He made me believe I was alone, that no one cared, that my daughter didn't want me, that I was losing my mind. I remembered the first time I forgot a PIN code. It had been changed. I thought maybe I'd done it myself. Then came the insurance forms I didn't remember signing, the bills that never arrived, the missed calls I swore I never heard. It all seemed so harmless, so explainable, until it wasn't. He made her believe I was sick, I said quietly. Tasha started taking over small things, groceries, the bills. She said it was just to help, but every little act of help chipped away at my independence, at my credibility. Raymond nodded slowly. He was building a case before you even knew you were in one. Tears stung at the corners of my eyes. She was my life, I said. Everything I did, every sacrifice I did for her. I worked double shifts, skipped vacations, went without so she could have more. She'll see the truth, Raymond said. Maybe not today, but soon. I want to believe that. I rubbed my hands together, skin dry and thin. But when your own child looks at you like you're a burden... Raymond reached across the table, gently placing his hand over mine. His palm was warm, steady. You are not a burden, Lillian. You are the victim of a con, and the truth has a way of rising. I looked at him, really looked, for the first time in decades. His hair was more gray than I remembered, his hands rougher, but the man inside, the one who once stood with me at a church altar, trembling with hope, was still there. You never married? I asked. He shook his head. Came close once, but no one ever made me feel like you did. I looked away, flustered by how much I needed to hear that. A knock on the door ended the moment. The bailiff stepped in. Court resumes in 5 minutes. Raymond stood and helped me up. You ready? No, I said, but I'm going anyway. We walked back toward the courtroom, the hallway narrowing like the throat of a song waiting to be sung. As we neared the double doors, I glanced at Raymond. You said he's your son, I whispered. He nodded. Then I guess this is personal for both of us. He didn't speak, just looked forward, jaw tight. And I understood. It wasn't just justice we were after. It was redemption. When we returned to the courtroom, something inside me had shifted. I was still afraid, still wounded, but the fear no longer owned me the way it had just days ago. Now it had a name, Marcus. And once fear has a name, it starts to lose its power. Raymond moved with quiet certainty, arranging papers, whispering briefly with the clerk. I sat beside him, my hands resting on my purse, fingers tracing the worn leather strap my husband had bought me years ago. I brought it with me out of habit, or maybe out of superstition. A piece of my old life, still intact. Mrs. Morgan, Judge Sands said as she took her seat, your counsel may proceed. Raymond stood. Your Honor, he began. Before addressing financial matters, I'd like to establish context, specifically the breakdown of communication between my client and her daughter. Marcus stiffened. I saw it in the angle of his shoulders. Raymond turned slightly, addressing the court but speaking for everyone to hear. Mrs. Morgan, when was the last time you spoke to your daughter before the lawsuit? I swallowed. Almost 6 months ago. A murmur rippled through the room. And during that time, he continued gently, did you attempt to contact her? Yes, I said, my voice steady despite the ache rising in my chest. I called. I left voicemails. I sent text messages. Letters. Raymond lifted a hand. Letters? I nodded. Handwritten, like I've always done. Birthday cards, notes. I even mailed her a photograph of us from when she was little. I thought maybe she'd remember. My throat tightened. I forced myself to continue. She never replied. I thought she was angry, or ashamed of me, or worse, relieved I was gone from her life. Raymond turned toward Tasha. Miss Manning, he said calmly, did you receive letters from your mother over the past 6 months? Tasha looked startled. Her eyes flicked toward Marcus, then back to Raymond. No, she said. She stopped reaching out. Marcus told me she wanted space. My heart dropped. Raymond didn't react. He simply nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. Your Honor, he said, I'd like to submit evidence. He handed a stack of envelopes to the bailiff. My handwriting stared back at me from the manila folders, looped, careful, familiar. Each envelope stamped and addressed, each returned. Every letter, Raymond said, was intercepted. Marked, "Return to sender." None were delivered. Postal records confirmed that a forwarding request was filed without Mrs. Morgan's consent. Marcus shot to his feet. "That's ridiculous." "Sit down," Judge Sands snapped. Raymond continued, his voice even. Additionally, phone records show that Mrs. Morgan's number was blocked on Miss Manning's phone. The block was installed remotely. I heard Tasha gasp. Her head turned sharply toward Marcus. "What does that mean?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. "It means nothing," he said quickly. "Technical glitch." Raymond didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "It means," he said, "that someone with administrative access to your phone settings prevented your mother's calls and messages from ever reaching you." The silence was deafening. I watched my daughter's face crumble in slow motion. Confusion gave way to disbelief. Disbelief to something sharper, something closer to grief. "I thought you abandoned me," she whispered, not to the room but to me. The sound of it tore through my chest. "I never would," I said, my voice breaking despite my best effort. "Not you, never you." Judge Sands leaned forward. "Mr. Manning, do you deny manipulating communication between your wife and her mother?" Marcus swallowed hard. "I was protecting her," he said. "My wife was under stress. Her mother was unstable." "Unstable." Raymond stepped closer. "Unstable because she asked questions? Because she noticed money disappearing? Because she wanted to speak to her daughter?" Marcus clenched his fists. "You're twisting things." Raymond turned back to the judge. "This court must understand. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was strategy. Isolation is a textbook tactic in elder abuse cases. Cut off support. Control the narrative. Make the victim doubt their own reality. Tinger Franks." I stared at the witness stand, remembering nights I sat alone, phone in hand, wondering why my child no longer loved me. Judge Sands exhaled slowly. "Miss Manning," she said, addressing Tasha, "did your husband ever tell you your mother was mentally unwell?" Tasha hesitated, then nodded. Tears welled in her eyes. He said, "She was forgetting things, that she was angry at me, that she didn't want me interfering." End quote. I felt something crack open inside me, not rage, not relief, but sorrow so deep it felt ancient. Raymond's voice softened. "Did you ever confirm that with her?" "No," Tasha whispered. "He said it would upset her." The judge closed her eyes briefly. Raymond returned to his seat beside me. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is no longer simply about assets. It's about a mother erased from her child's life by design." Judge Sands nodded slowly. "I agree. And every three is doublist." She turned to Marcus, her expression cold. "Mr. Manning, your credibility is deteriorating by the minute." Marcus said nothing. For the first time since all of this began, he looked small. I looked at my daughter. She finally met my eyes. There was pain there, shame, and something else, regret. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the lie had cracked. And once truth gets in, it never leaves quietly. The courthouse cafeteria smelled like burnt coffee and overcooked chili, but I didn't care. I sat near the window with a lukewarm sandwich in front of me, untouched, my mind spinning from the morning's revelations. Across the atrium, I saw her. Tasha. She walked slowly, arms crossed, face pale but composed. When she spotted me, she hesitated, just for a second. Then she turned, pushed through the cafeteria door, and came toward my table. She didn't sit, not at first. I looked up, heart pounding, uncertain whether to speak. "Was all of that true?" she asked, arms still crossed. Her voice was soft, but there was a steel edge under it. I nodded. "Yes." Tasha sat down across from me, her back straight, hands folded tightly in front of her. "I feel like I've been in a coma," she said. "Like I woke up and everything I thought I knew was a lie." "I know," I said gently. "That's how I felt too." She didn't look at me directly. Her eyes moved across the cafeteria, flicking toward Raymond, who stood by the far wall pretending not to watch us. "I didn't get your letters," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Not a single one." "I know," I said again. "Raymond found out what happened." She rubbed her temples. "Why would he do that? Why would Marcus? I mean, I knew he liked control, but Tasha! I reached across the table. He didn't just like control, he needed it. That's how men like him survive. She didn't pull away from my touch, but she didn't take my hand either. He told me you were paranoid, she whispered, that you were forgetting things, that you yelled at the mailman for stealing bills. I gave a sad smile. I never yelled, I asked, politely, repeatedly, and then one day, he just stopped coming to the door. Tasha finally looked at me then. Really looked. You lost so much weight, she said, and your eye, is that from when he? I shook my head quickly. Just a bruise. It's nothing. No, it's not, she snapped. It's not nothing. You're my mother. My throat tightened. And you, she added, her voice breaking. You still called me baby in court. After everything. I nodded, blinking back tears. Because that's who you are. My baby, no matter what. Silence settled between us like a fog. I believed him, she whispered. You trusted your husband, I said gently. That's not a crime, but I trusted him over you. I exhaled. We both did. She looked down at her hands. He told me not to log into my social media, said it was too distracting. He had all my passwords, said it was safer that way. I didn't think twice. My stomach dropped. He had access to your accounts? She nodded. He changed my recovery email, my security questions, even blocked a few of my friends, said they were toxic. Raymond stepped forward then, sensing something important. Tasha noticed him. Can he look into that? See what else Marcus did? He can, I said, standing slowly. He will. She stood too. I don't know what happens after this, she said, brushing a tear from her cheek. I don't know how we come back from it. Me neither, I admitted. But I know this paper doesn't break blood, and no man gets to rewrite our story unless we let him. She looked at me for a long time. Then, hesitantly, she stepped forward and hugged me. Not tight, not long, but real. I closed my eyes and breathed her in. For a moment, she smelled like childhood again, like baby lotion and apple juice, like home. When she pulled back, her face was wet. Let's go back, she said. Let's finish this. I nodded. And as we walked side by side toward the courtroom, I felt something unfamiliar rising in my chest. Not hope, not yet, but something close. We returned to court that afternoon not as enemies, not quite as allies, but something new, something in between. Tasha sat on the same side of the room as me now, across from Marcus. It was subtle, but everyone noticed. Even Marcus, especially Marcus. His eyes darted between us, flicking with the unease of a man watching his chessboard flip. Judge Sands resumed the hearing with practiced calm, but the air in the room was different, less theater, more reckoning. Raymond stood and cleared his throat. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to request access to a specific personal item that may be pivotal to this case. Go on, the judge said. It concerns a locked metal box, approximately 12 inches wide, black, labeled property of Charles Morgan. At the sound of my late husband's name, something stirred in my chest, a grief that never left, only settled deep in the bones. Raymond turned to me. Mrs. Morgan, can you explain the significance of this box? I nodded slowly. My husband kept it under our bed, said it was for emergencies only. I wasn't supposed to open it unless something happened to him. End quote. And did something happen? He passed, I said quietly. 3 years ago. The courtroom remained still. I found the box after the funeral, I continued. I didn't open it. It didn't feel right, but I knew it was important. And did Marcus Manning ever mention the box? Raymond asked. Tasha's voice came before mine. Yes, she said clearly. He told me he'd found it one day while cleaning. He said it was just old receipts and worthless paperwork. He said he threw it away. And everyone, I turned to her, stunned. He said that? She nodded. I didn't question it. I was tired, grieving. I trusted him. Raymond stepped back toward the judge. We believe this box contains original versions of several legal documents, including an unrevoked power of attorney dated before Mr. Manning's, as well as handwritten notes from Mr. Power, Charles Morgan, regarding asset allocation and trust funds. Do you know where it is now? The judge asked. Raymond gave a small nod. Yes. We have reason to believe Mr. Manning moved it to a locked cabinet in his private office at Westbridge Financial. Marcus stood suddenly. That's absurd. That's my personal workspace. Raymond didn't blink. Then you won't mind if the court issues a subpoena? The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Manning, if there's nothing to hide, you'll have no objection. Marcus opened his mouth, then shut it. Raymond leaned on the table, voice calm. You see, Marcus is smart. He knows digital trails can be buried, passwords changed, phone records intercepted, but what he didn't count on was something analog, something his algorithms can't rewrite a man's handwriting, his words, his will. Tasha looked shaken, but she didn't flinch. The judge glanced at her clerk. I'll sign the order by end of day. Raymond turned back to me, his voice low but firm. If that box is intact, this case will end before the week is out. I nodded, breath tight in my chest. Because for the first time since this began, we weren't just reacting, we were moving forward. Outside the courtroom, the sky had turned silver, the kind of sky that promised thunder or clarity, but never both. Raymond walked beside me silently, briefcase in hand. I could see in his expression that something else weighed on him. You okay? I asked. He hesitated, then said, It's strange, fighting your own son. I stopped. You still call him that? Raymond looked up at the clouds. He shares my blood, but he doesn't share my character. I placed a hand on his arm. Then blood isn't what matters. Choice is. He nodded slowly. Back in the day, Charles used to say, Some people inherit wealth, others inherit storms. I never knew what he meant until now. And today, I was learning to dance in the rain. By the time the court issued the subpoena, it was already late afternoon. Clouds had thickened above the city skyline, casting a slate-gray hush over downtown. Inside the courthouse, fluorescent lights flickered to life, their cold glow bouncing off polished linoleum floors. Raymond wasted no time. He met the court-appointed officer outside and drove straight to Westbridge Financial, Marcus's self-made kingdom. Sleek, glass-walled, impersonal. The kind of place where charm wore a suit and truth was considered a liability. Meanwhile, I waited. Back at my home, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same kind of silence that had haunted me these past months. This silence was alert, listening, like the house itself was holding its breath. I moved slowly through the living room, stopping at the bookshelf where Charles's photograph still sat framed in dark walnut, forever smiling in his Sunday suit. I picked it up and stared at his eyes, looking for something I hadn't seen before. You warned me, I whispered, and I didn't want to believe it. I'm 7. It had been a winter night, more than 20 years ago, when Charles first brought it up. We had just returned from visiting his cousin's family. Marcus had been there then, just a bright, clever boy with a mischievous grin and a handshake too firm for a 10-year-old. He's sharp, I'd said as we peeled off our coats. Going places. Charles poured himself a drink and sat heavily in his chair. He's dangerous, he'd replied. I laughed at the time. He's a child. Charles didn't laugh. He watches people, not with curiosity, with calculation. Did you notice how he made the younger kids cry, then acted like the hero who calmed them down? I had shrugged it off. Boys push boundaries. But Charles's face remained troubled. That boy doesn't push. He plots. I hadn't thought of that conversation in years. Not until now. And now it echoed like prophecy. The doorbell rang sharply, jolting me out of the memory. I nearly dropped the photo. I opened the door to find Tasha, her face pink from the wind, clutching 2 hot drinks and a paper bag. Mom, she said quietly, you didn't eat at lunch. I stepped aside to let her in, overcome by the simplest act of kindness. She placed everything on the table and unwrapped a turkey sandwich, my favorite. She still remembered. Raymond's not back yet? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. We sat down together, the smell of roasted meat and warm bread filling the space. Tasha hesitated. Do you think Dad knew? I paused. About Marcus? She nodded. I think your father had instincts about people. He always did. But he trusted me to see things clearly. That was his mistake. No, she said firmly. That was Marcus's trick. He made you doubt your instincts. That's his real talent. I looked at her and saw not the child I raised, but a woman waking up sore, confused but awake. The phone rang. I rushed to answer. Raymond's voice came through, steady and urgent. We found it. I nearly dropped the receiver. The box? It was hidden in the cabinet behind a false wall, locked tight, but unopened. Is it? Everything's there. Charles's handwritten letters, a power of attorney dated and notarized before Marcus's. Even statements noting bank irregularities he suspected. I sank into the couch. Thank God. Tasha should see it too, Raymond added. There's a letter in there. Addressed to her. End quote. My breath caught. A letter? I whispered. Yes. He must have written it not long before he passed. I turned to Tasha. Your father left you something. Her eyes filled instantly. I thought he was too sick at the end. I shook my head. Apparently not. Raymond's voice softened. This changes everything. I know, I said. We're coming tomorrow. After I hung up, Tasha sat very still. Then she reached for my hand this time without hesitation. Whatever's in that box, she said, I want to know it. All of it. No more lies. And just like that, the ghosts in the house seemed to settle, because truth was coming home. Raymond's office didn't look like the kind of place where lives were turned inside out. It was neat, understated, lined with bookshelves, dotted with framed degrees and soft leather chairs. But when we stepped into that quiet room, it felt like entering a chapel. The black metal box sat on the desk like an artifact unearthed from a different century. Solid, unassuming, yet impossibly heavy with meaning. Raymond greeted us both with a nod. I haven't opened the letter, he said. I thought you should be the first. Tasha sat beside me, clutching her coat tightly around her. The room was warm, but her hands trembled as Raymond unlocked the box and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, everything was preserved like Charles had packed it yesterday. Bank statements, deeds, an old passport, a yellowed envelope with Tasha's name written in her father's careful print. Raymond passed it to her, then quietly stepped away. She held it in both hands, her eyes scanning the front as if memorizing every curve of each letter. I didn't know he had time, she whispered. I said nothing. I simply watched her breathe in the past. With a quiet tear trailing down her cheek, Tasha opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet inside. The paper crackled softly dry, fragile, but whole. She read aloud. My Tasha, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. I wish I could have told you these things face to face, but time has a way of slipping through our fingers, and there are things a man needs to say before he's gone. Tasha paused, her throat tightening. Raymond stayed silent in the corner, gaze respectfully averted. She continued, voice shaking. You've always had a big heart, baby girl. You want to see the good in people, and that's a beautiful thing. But sometimes, love can blind us to danger, especially when danger wears a smile and says all the right things. She glanced at me, eyes wide, then back to the letter. Marcus is not what he seems. I saw it in him long ago. He's clever, but cleverness without conscience is a dangerous thing. If he's still in your life, tread carefully. And if your mother tells you something doesn't feel right, listen to her. She's not just your mom. She's the strongest person I've ever known. A sob escaped her lips. She pressed the letter to her chest, then steadied herself and kept reading. No matter what happens, remember, people will try to divide you two. The world will try to make you forget who you are, but don't let it. Protect each other. Forgive when you can. Fight when you must. And love always. Tears streamed down her face now. You were my light, Tasha. Don't ever let anyone dim that. I may different mated. All my love. Dad. She folded the letter carefully, like something sacred. No one spoke for a long while. When she finally did, her voice was almost childlike. He knew. I nodded. He always did. She looked at me, her face streaked with emotion, and I didn't listen to either of you. You're listening now, I said gently. That's what matters. Raymond approached quietly. This letter, coupled with the documents and dates inside the box, gives us what we need. It proves Marcus deliberately overrode a previous power of attorney and suppressed key financial documents. It proves manipulation. Tasha's jaw tightened. I want him to pay. He will, Raymond said, but more than that, he'll be stopped. I looked down at the box, remembering all the years Charles had kept it tucked beneath our bed. How many times had I dusted under it, moved it aside without realizing its worth? And now, here it was. A father's last word. A husband's quiet legacy. A key that could unlock everything. Outside the window, rain began to fall, a steady, cleansing patter against the glass. Tasha stood, still clutching the letter. "Let's take this to court," she said. "Let's burn his house of lies to the ground." And I, who had once felt so alone, rose beside her. Because this time, I wasn't alone. This time, I had my daughter. And Charles. And the truth. Courtroom 3B was packed. Word had spread. Something about the tone of the judge's voice at the last hearing, or the hush that followed the mention of Charles Morgan's name, it all hinted that today would be different. I sat beside Raymond once again, the familiar weight of expectation pressing against my chest. But this time, Tasha sat behind me. Not beside Marcus, not on the sidelines. Behind me. With her hand resting gently on my shoulder, Raymond stood as Judge Sands called the court to order. "Your Honor," he began, "we would like to submit into evidence a private letter written by the late Charles Morgan, addressed to his daughter. This letter, along with accompanying documentation, directly contradicts the current claims made by Mr. Marcus Manning." Marcus shifted uncomfortably at the table across from us. The judge gestured. "Proceed." Raymond handed the letter to the clerk, then turned toward Marcus. "Mr. Manning, please take the stand." "It's Clayton Rackmandand." Marcus stood, smoothed his suit, and walked with practiced ease. But there was a tightness in his jaw, a hesitation in his steps. The confidence he wore like a mask now had cracks. Raymond didn't speak right away. He let the silence stretch. Then, "Mr. Manning, can you confirm that you were aware of a metal box in Mrs. Morgan's home?" Marcus glanced at the judge, then shrugged. "I remember a box. It didn't look important." "And did you access it?" "No. I told Tasha it was probably trash, just old files." Raymond nodded. "Old files, including her late husband's last will and handwritten instructions?" "I didn't know what was in it," Marcus said, sharper now. "Did you tell your wife that you discarded the box?" "Yes," Marcus admitted, more carefully. "I thought it was junk." Raymond lifted the document folder. "But you didn't discard it. You moved it, hid it, in your locked office, behind a false cabinet wall." "I didn't," Marcus faltered. Raymond stepped closer. "Then how do you explain your fingerprints on the latch, Mr. Manning? Or the security footage of you bringing it into the building after hours?" The courtroom rustled. Judge Sands raised her brow. Marcus swallowed hard. I was protecting her. There were things in that box that would have upset her outdated legal language, conflicting documents. I was going to sort through it. "And did you?" Raymond asked. "No, I didn't have time." In quote. "I'm said, time to open it," Raymond clarified. "But you had time to refile power of attorney under your name and change account beneficiaries." Marcus didn't answer. Raymond turned slightly. "Let's talk about that letter. The one written by Charles Morgan." He held up a copy. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to read a short excerpt." "Granted," the judge said. Raymond's voice softened as he began. "Marcus is not what he seems. I saw it in him long ago. Cleverness without conscience is a dangerous thing. If he's still in your life, tread carefully." Tasha's breath hitched behind me. I could feel her tears. Raymond looked back to Marcus. "How do you explain the accuracy of this letter, written before your marriage to Tasha, predicting exactly what you've done?" Marcus shifted in his seat. "That letter's not legally binding." "Ah," Raymond said. "So it's the legality you're concerned with, not the truth of it." "It's no it. I'm saying it doesn't prove." "It proves motive," Raymond cut in. "It proves deception. And it proves that Charles Morgan saw through you long before anyone else did." The tension in the room was palpable. Raymond delivered the final blow with calm precision. "And let's not forget," he said, voice razor-sharp, "you weren't just intercepting mail. You were manipulating medical records, making Tasha believe her mother was mentally unstable." "She was forgetting things," Marcus shot back. "I have psychological assessments from 3 years ago," Raymond replied smoothly. "Mrs. Morgan's memory was tested regularly after Charles's death. No signs of cognitive decline. Care to try another lie?" Marcus looked down, jaw clenched. Judge Sands leaned forward. "Mr. Manning, this is your opportunity to respond. I suggest you use it wisely." But Marcus said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. I sat frozen, every breath tight, every heartbeat a drumbeat of memory. Raymond turned to the judge. We request full dismissal of Mr. Manning's claim to any Morgan estate assets. Additionally, we are filing a counterclaim for elder abuse, financial fraud, and intentional emotional harm. The judge nodded slowly. Motion acknowledged. I'll need time to review. As the gavel echoed once again, Marcus stepped down from the stand, not like a man walking free, but like one approaching the edge of something steep. He passed me on his way out, and for the first time, he didn't smirk, didn't sneer. He just looked afraid. And I finally breathed. The day after the cross-examination, the silence should have felt like peace. Instead, it was the calm before another storm. It started with a message from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Lillian, are you okay? Just saw something terrible on Facebook. Is it true?" I blinked, confused. Tasha, sitting beside me in the kitchen, frowned at my phone. "What is it?" she asked. I showed her the message. She reached for her own phone, tapping quickly. Her face paled almost instantly. "Mom, don't look." But it was too late. A video had been uploaded the night before. A poorly edited clip, cobbled together from home footage taken years ago, mostly from when Charles had first gotten sick. I recognized my voice in the background, raised with worry, sometimes frustration. Moments where I'd snapped small, tired exclamations taken completely out of context. Marcus had strung them together like pearls of poison. The caption read, "Elder abuse from inside the Morgan home. Who is the real victim here?" It had been viewed over 20,000 times. My name was trending locally. My face, gray-haired, hunched from stress, frozen in a frame mid-sentence, mouth open, eyes wild. A monster, edited into existence. Tasha stared in horror. He edited everything. He made it look like you were yelling at Dad, like you were losing your mind. I sank into the chair, numb. "It's working," I whispered. "He's painting me as unfit, unstable, violent." Raymond arrived at the house not long after. Tasha had sent him a screenshot. His jaw tightened as he watched the video. We knew he might retaliate. This was his insurance plan. "Can we take it down?" Tasha asked. Raymond shook his head. He didn't post it directly. "It's been distributed through burner accounts and seeded in forums. He probably paid a service to spread it fast and wide." I looked at him, heart racing. "Can he do this, legally?" Raymond nodded grimly. "Temporarily, yes. Long enough to cause doubt, delay proceedings, discredit you in the eyes of anyone watching." I closed my eyes. "And it's working." "He's desperate," Raymond said. "This is the move of a man who knows he's cornered, but slander is still a crime. And if we can trace the origin, he's just added defamation and digital harassment to his list." Tasha rubbed her temples. "He used videos from my account, from my old hard drive. He must have taken copies back when we lived together." Raymond took out his laptop and began typing furiously. "I have a contact in digital forensics. We'll start tracing IPs." The minutes ticked by as I sat in stunned silence. Every ring of my phone now felt like another bomb about to drop. Tasha paced the kitchen. "He didn't just want the money," she said suddenly. "He wanted to erase you, to make everyone think he saved me from you." I nodded slowly. "That's how he wins. Not just by taking what's mine, but by rewriting the story." Raymond looked up. "Then we'll write it louder." He turned the screen toward us. A still frame from Marcus's video filled the space, but on the bottom corner, just barely visible, was the logo of a media firm. Small, blurred, but not gone. "I know that, Mark," Raymond said. "It's a third-party PR group. They specialize in smear campaigns and digital suppression, and I know exactly who to subpoena." For the first time that day, I felt something stronger than fear. Anger. Not the wild kind. Not the kind that made you scream. The quiet kind. Focused. Clean. Like a scalpel in the hand of a surgeon who knew exactly where to cut. "I want him to face everything," I said. "Every lie. Every word." Raymond nodded. "He will." Outside, rain began to fall again. But this time, it felt different. This wasn't the kind of storm that ruined things. This was the kind that washed the rot away. She wore a red wool coat, despite the early spring warmth, and sunglasses that barely hid the nervous flicker in her eyes. Raymond had set the meeting in a quiet diner just outside the city, one of those places with sticky booths and coffee that tasted like regret. But it was safe. and more importantly, off Marcus's radar. Her name was Linda, mid-40s. Sharp voice, fidgeting hands, and a secret she'd carried for far too long. "I saw the video," she began, fingers tight around her mug, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I leaned forward. "You know Marcus?" She nodded, removing her glasses. "Too well. I used to work at Westbridge. I was on his internal accounts team for 3 years. Raymond's eyes narrowed. "You left last year?" "Was forced out," she corrected. "He said I wasn't aligned with the company vision. What he meant was, I started asking questions." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small stack of papers. "I kept copies," she said. "Backups. I know I wasn't supposed to, but something always felt off." Raymond took the papers carefully, scanning quickly. Then he stopped. "This is a contract signature authorization form," he said. Linda nodded. "From the Morgan account. Look at the date." He did. "It's dated 2 weeks after Charles Morgan's death." End quote. "And the signature," she added. "Compare it to earlier forms. That's not Charles's handwriting. I know because Marcus made me copy it. He printed out older letters and told me to practice until it looked right. Said it was just for formatting." My chest went cold. "You're saying he forged Charles's signature?" I asked. She nodded. "And I wasn't the only one," she added. "He had an intern named Ben who helped reroute the paper trail. When Ben asked too many questions, Marcus told everyone he was unstable, the poor kid left in tears." Raymond set the pages down slowly, every movement deliberate. "This," he said, "is the last nail in the coffin." Linda took a deep breath. "I'm risking a lot by coming forward. I signed NDAs. I still have family in the area." "You'll be protected," Raymond assured, "and compensated for any risk." She nodded. "I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing it because no one else has stood up to him." I looked at her with a mix of awe and heartbreak. "Why now?" I asked. Linda sipped her coffee. "Because I saw your face in that video, and I saw my mother's face too. She was just like you, strong, quiet, taken advantage of." She stood, pulling her coat tighter. "I can't undo what I let happen," she said, "but maybe I can stop him from doing it again." As she walked away, the bell above the diner door jingled gently. Raymond stared after her, then turned to me. "We put her on the stand next week. No warning. No prep from Marcus's lawyers. Just the truth." I nodded slowly. For the first time since this nightmare began, the scales of justice no longer felt mythical, no longer tilted, no longer symbolic. They felt real, and they were starting to tip. The morning began with a knock on the door, not loud, not rushed, but purposeful. Raymond entered holding a flash drive and a look I hadn't seen before. It wasn't his usual lawyer, calm or righteous fire. It was triumph. "I think we've got him," he said. I followed him into the living room as he plugged the drive into his laptop. Tasha sat beside me, already sensing something important. "I ran a sweep through Marcus's digital footprint," Raymond said, "focused on shell companies tied to his Westbridge access. I found a name that popped up on multiple internal invoices, but never in public filings. Northleaf Consulting, LLC. Sound familiar?" I shook my head. Tasha leaned forward. "Wait, he mentioned something once," she said slowly. "Said he had a friend at Northleaf who helped him optimize taxes for your estate." Raymond gave a dry smile. "There's no friend. Northleaf was registered last year. The address is a P.O. box. And the sole account holder?" He turned the screen to show us Marcus Manning. The numbers were staggering. Wire transfers dating back 18 months. Funds rerouted from joint family accounts, carefully laundered through fake invoices for estate consultation, document authentication, and even grief support services. I felt sick. "He told me he was helping with probate," I whispered. "He was helping himself," Raymond said, "to nearly $500,000. Tasha stood suddenly, pacing. "He told me he was traveling to D.C. to meet with attorneys," she said. "I remember because it was the same weekend he forgot our anniversary. And skalded to savin." Raymond nodded. "That was the largest transfer week on record." She stopped, breathing hard. "I can't believe I believed him." I rose and walked to her, placing a hand on her back. "You loved him," I said. "That's not a crime." Tasha turned to Raymond, voice steady despite her trembling hands. "What happens if I testify?" she asked. Raymond blinked. Are you sure? Yes. I'm the only one who can confirm those trips. Those excuses, the lies. He used me as a cover. I won't stay silent. My eyes filled. She wasn't just choosing truth. She was choosing me. Raymond nodded. Your testimony could seal the case, but it won't be easy. I don't care, she said. He made me part of this without asking. Now I'll be the part that ends it. She sat back down, her shoulders straighter, her face resolute. I want to tell the court everything. Later that night, we sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, the sky turning peach and amber. Tasha rested her head on my shoulder like she hadn't done in years. I'm scared, she admitted. So was I said. But now, I'm not anymore. She smiled faintly, and in that moment, the fear didn't vanish, but it no longer owned us. Because truth was now our witness. The courtroom felt colder that day. Even with the spring sun shining through the high windows, there was a chill in the air, a tension that hadn't quite settled since Marcus's smear campaign fell apart. Everyone knew the stakes now. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a reckoning. Tasha stood at the witness stand, her hands clasped together so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her hair was pulled back, her blouse simple and elegant. She looked calm on the outside, but I could see the storm she carried inside. Raymond approached slowly. State your name for the record, please. Tasha Manning, she said. And your relationship to the defendant? She glanced toward Marcus, who avoided her eyes. He's my husband, she answered, then added quietly, for now. Raymond gave her a small, respectful nod. Mrs. Manning, can you tell the court about the time period during which the defendant claimed to be assisting your mother with financial matters? Tasha cleared her throat. It started a few months after my father passed. Marcus said he was helping her organize documents, managing some of the estate paperwork. I didn't question it at the time I was grieving, and I trusted him. Did he travel during this period? Raymond asked. Yes, several times. He said he was meeting with lawyers in D.C., in Chicago, even Los Angeles. But when I asked for details, his stories changed. Raymond stepped aside so the jury could see her clearly. Did you ever see the financial paperwork yourself? No, she said. He said it was too complicated and that he'd take care of it. Raymond pulled up a document on the screen. Mrs. Manning, do you recognize this transaction? She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. That's the week he was in New York. He said he was at a finance conference. And this account Northleaf Consulting? She nodded. That's the name he mentioned once. Said it was an estate advisory firm. I believed him. Do you still? Tasha looked straight at Marcus. No, she said. Not anymore. Raymond stepped back. No further questions. The opposing lawyer stood. A young man with slicked back hair and a rehearsed smile. Mrs. Manning, he began, you say you're now testifying against your husband. That's a dramatic shift, wouldn't you say? It's a necessary one, she replied. And yet, he continued, only weeks ago, you were still living with him, trusting him, calling your mother unstable in public records. Tasha flinched, but didn't look away. I was wrong, she said simply. Or confused? The lawyer prodded. Perhaps influenced? He turned toward me, sitting quietly at the table. Your relationship with your mother has had its ups and downs. Wouldn't you agree? Tasha didn't blink. My mother and I have fought. We've disagreed, but she has never tried to manipulate me. She never hid documents, never told me who to trust or isolate me from friends. Marcus did all of that. The lawyer raised a brow. So you're suggesting you were emotionally controlled? Yes. Isn't that convenient? Tasha stood straighter. It's the truth, she said. And I'm not here to protect my pride. I'm here to stop a man who's been lying to all of us. The lawyer hesitated, caught off guard by her clarity. Then, with a forced smile, no further questions. Tasha turned to the judge. I'd like to say one last thing, she said. The judge nodded. She looked across the room, her eyes resting on me. For years, I thought being loyal meant defending someone at all costs, even when it hurt, even when it felt wrong. But loyalty without truth is just fear in disguise. The courtroom fell silent. I believe my mother, she said. And today, I choose justice. She stepped down. And in that moment, I no longer saw my little girl trying to find her place in the world. I saw a woman, a fighter. My daughter, The courthouse halls had never felt quieter. Not because there were fewer people, but because something had shifted. The balance of fear had moved. It no longer hovered over me. It clung to Marcus. Every movement he made that morning was stiff, calculated. Gone was the easy swagger, the charming husband mask. Now, he walked like a man, watching the floor beneath him crack with each step. Raymond arrived early, flanked by his assistant and a small security detail. It wasn't paranoia, not anymore. Not after Marcus had tried to contact me directly 2 nights ago, leaving a voicemail filled with veiled threats and twisted guilt. Raymond played it for the court. I gave you everything. You want to paint me as a villain? Fine. But don't think I'll go down alone. Judge Sands listened in silence. When it ended, she didn't speak right away. Then, with calm authority, she said, I'm issuing a temporary gag order on Mr. Manning and ordering an investigation into potential witness intimidation. Marcus didn't even look surprised, but his jaw tightened. And that was just the beginning. Raymond presented the forensic audit next, tracing Marcus's financial fraud across multiple accounts, including payments to the media firm responsible for the smear campaign. Linda's sworn affidavit was entered into record. Screenshots, email metadata, falsified signatures. Everything aligned, everything unraveling. By midday, the defense lawyer, now visibly stressed, requested a recess. In the private side room, as we waited, I saw Marcus lose control. He snapped at his attorney. You said they had nothing. They didn't until your wife flipped. Marcus turned to Tasha, who sat outside the glass-paneled door. Really? He hissed. You let her turn you against me? She didn't have to, Tasha replied without flinching. You did that all by yourself. It's Krasdedings. He stared at her, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else. But he didn't. He looked down instead, cornered, alone. Judge Sands reconvened the court after lunch with an announcement. Based on new evidence, a decision would be made regarding potential criminal charges. Marcus would be held for further questioning by financial crime investigators. The room shifted quietly, but undeniably. I watched as 2 plainclothes officers approached him. He didn't resist, didn't protest, just stood, lips tight, fists clenched. He looked at me once, just once, as they led him away. Not with fury, not with arrogance, but with a flicker of something he'd never shown me before. Fear. And in that silence, as the heavy doors closed behind him, I realized something profound. He wasn't the strong one. He never had been. He was just louder. Now, for the first time, his silence said more than his lies ever could. The key still fit. I wasn't sure it would. It had been over a year since I last stepped inside my own front door. But when I turned the lock and pushed it open, the door creaked just the same, that low, familiar groan like a weary old friend waking from sleep. The house was spotless. Not the comforting kind of clean, not the smell of cookies, shoes by the door kind. It was cold, empty, sterile. Marcus had always liked appearances. The rug was different. The picture frames on the hallway wall half were missing. The ones left behind were generic landscapes. No faces. No family. In the kitchen, the old spice rack Charles built me was gone, replaced with a sleek steel shelf lined with labels I didn't recognize. The table was still there, but the dent on the corner where Tasha had banged her tricycle as a toddler had been sanded down, polished, smooth, erased. I moved slowly, room by room, touching the edges of what had once been mine. The guest room, my sanctuary after Charles passed, was now an office. Marcus's office. The scent of his cologne still lingered faintly. I opened a drawer and found shredded paper, dozens of them. My handwriting, fragments of letters I'd written to Charles, prayers I'd scrawled when grief had been too heavy to bear. He hadn't just removed me from the house. He'd tried to erase me. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, and stared at the empty nightstand where Charles's lamp once sat. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even heartbroken. I was something else. Free. For the first time in what felt like forever, I took a deep breath and didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Later that afternoon, a knock echoed through the stillness. Tasha stood there, holding a small box wrapped in faded blue paper. I found this, she said, in one of Marcus's storage bins. She placed it in my hands. Inside was a tarnished brass compass, old, worn. I knew it instantly. Charles's. He kept this in his desk drawer, I whispered. Always said it helped him stay grounded. Tasha sat beside me. I thought it was lost, I added. So did I, she said. But I guess Marcus couldn't quite throw it away. He hid it instead. We sat there for a while, the box between us. No words. Just breath, presence, forgiveness. At some point, she leaned her head on my shoulder again, and I closed my eyes, not to forget, but to remember, because not everything had been erased. Some things, some loves refused to disappear. They survive, just like I did. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial resumed. Every seat was filled. The press bench whispered predictions. Some looked at me with pity, others with curiosity. I didn't need their sympathy. I had truth. The defense team tried to regain control, desperate to shift the narrative. Marcus wasn't present. He remained in custody pending charges, but his lawyers were still clawing for air. They introduced new evidence that morning. Printed emails, a few photocopied letters supposedly written by Charles, expressing doubts about my mental stability and trustworthiness. One even claimed I was prone to emotional outbursts and paranoia. Raymond let them finish. Then he rose, calm and composed. "Your Honor," he said, holding up one of the letters, "these documents are dated 6 months before Charles Morgan passed. But as you can see," he walked to the projection screen, "they're written in a typeface Charles never used. His stationery was custom, his printer unique. We verified the ink type, font spacing, and metadata. These letters were created less than 4 weeks ago." Gasps. Raymond looked directly at the jury. "This is not just a lie. This is a deliberate attempt to forge the words of a dead man and manipulate this court." The judge leaned back, face stern. "Strike the evidence," she said, "and note the incident for additional review under fraud." Tasha gripped my hand from the bench behind. Raymond turned to me and nodded gently. "It's time," he said. I stood slowly. Every step to the witness stand felt like stepping out of a shadow. The court clerk swore me in. And then I faced the 12 strangers who held the power to finish what Marcus had started or what we were ending. "I never wanted to be here," I began. "I never thought my life would end up as a courtroom drama. But here we are." A few quiet chuckles. "I raised a daughter with love. I buried a husband with dignity. And I opened my home to a man who smiled with perfect teeth and hid knives behind his back." I paused. "I'm not perfect," I've shouted. "I've cried. I've made mistakes. But I have never abused the people I love, and I never stole anything from anyone." My voice held steady. "What I did was trust, and I paid the price for it." I looked over at Raymond, then at Tasha. "But here's what I've learned. Justice doesn't always come with sirens and handcuffs. Sometimes it comes in whispers, in witness stands, in daughters finding their way home." The room was still. "I don't need revenge. I don't need Marcus to suffer. I need truth, and I need peace." I nodded toward the jury. "Please help me get both." When I stepped down, I felt lighter. Not because it was over, but because I had finally said what needed to be said, out loud. To the world, and most importantly to myself. The jury had been gone for nearly 3 hours. Each tick of the courtroom clock echoed like thunder. The wood bench beneath me felt harder than it had all week. My fingers trembled in my lap, though I tried not to show it. Tasha sat beside me, silent, but present. Raymond reviewed notes he didn't need to review, just something to keep his hands moving, keep his mind from wandering into worst-case scenarios. The judge returned first, then the clerk. Then, slowly, the 12 members of the jury filed in. One man held the envelope in his hand, the foreman. My heart stopped when he looked at me. Calm, steady, no smirk, no pity, just closure. The clerk approached him, took the slip of paper, and handed it to Judge Sands. She read in silence, nodded once, then looked up. "In the matter of Morgan versus Manning, the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff Mrs. Lillian Morgan." I didn't breathe. "Further, the jury finds the defendant, Marcus Manning, guilty of financial fraud, elder abuse, document forgery, and attempted obstruction of justice." My hand flew to my mouth. Tasha gripped my arm, whispering, "Mom, we did it. You did it." But the judge wasn't done. Given the severity of these findings, the court is recommending that the state pursue criminal prosecution under Penal Codes 368 and 470. All estate assets will be returned to Mrs. Morgan. A restraining order is hereby issued against the defendant. No applause. No chaos. Just a heavy, reverent silence. Like justice, at last, had come home. Raymond turned to me, eyes glassy. "You're free now." I couldn't speak. Not because I had nothing to say, but because for the first time in months I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The system had done it for me. As we left the courthouse, flashes from reporters lit the sidewalk, but they were distant, muted, like echoes from someone else's life. I paused at the top of the steps and looked back at the grand old doors, the people inside, the memories that would forever live in that room. Then I turned away. One chapter had ended, but not with a bang, with quiet, with dignity, and with the soft rustle of freedom returning to a woman who had earned it. It was spring again, the kind of spring that made you forget winter had ever existed, where the air smelled like fresh grass and redemption. My roses were blooming. Not all of them survived, but the ones that did stood proud, like they knew what they'd overcome. Much like me. The house felt warmer now, lived in, mine. Tasha had helped repaint the living room last weekend soft sage green, Charles's favorite. She came every Thursday now, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with just time. We didn't need to talk much. The silence between us had become something gentle. Today, I stood in the attic. The last place I hadn't touched since Marcus was removed. The box was still there, tucked behind old trunks. Letters. My letters. The ones he'd shredded. I had spent weeks taping them back together. Not because I wanted to relive the pain, but because I refused to let him erase me. Some pages were still torn at the edges. Some sentences were missing. But the love was intact. The truth still legible. I placed them in a new binder, pressed each page flat with care. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with a fresh notebook. The first page was blank, waiting. I picked up my pen, hand steady, and I began to write. Not a diary, not a statement, a story. Mine. I wrote about Charles, about his laugh, the way he could fix anything with string and stubbornness, about the last night we danced in the kitchen to a song no one else knew. I wrote about Tasha, about the day she was born, red-faced and wailing, about the way she used to sneak into our bed during thunderstorms, about the pain and the healing that came after. I even wrote about Marcus, not as a villain in a cloak, but as a man made small by his own greed, a shadow that taught me where the light lived. The sky turned gold and lavender as the sun dipped low. I stood and switched on the porch light. It had been broken for months. Now it glowed. A simple bulb, humming gently against the quiet. Not a beacon. Not a flare. Just a light. For anyone who ever lost their way and needed to know someone was still home, still shining, still standing. This story is a quiet anthem for anyone who has ever been silenced, betrayed, or made to question their worth. It reminds us that strength isn't always loud, and justice doesn't always arrive in flashing lights. Sometimes it comes through truth spoken in steady voices, through daughters who return, and through women who refuse to disappear. No matter how much someone tries to erase you, your truth, your love, and your dignity are not so easily buried. In the end, the light you keep on for yourself and for others is what makes you unbreakable.